Hello again, SD. Okay, so we are going to look at cutting, sizing and shaping of the wood for our SD Birdhouse project. This is the next stage in the manufacturing process, and we've already carried out by now our preparation for manufacturing. So I'll give you a little list here. We should have purchased or ordered all the materials or components, which we've done. They've been supplied by Mr. Campbell down in the workshop for us. We have read the working drawings. We've established a practical sequence for manufacture. That was part of the exercise you were given last week. We've prepared the materials by cutting the material to size. It's been smoothed down for us. We've done away with the rough sawn edges, etc. And we've also assured the quality of the materials. We've checked for flaws and knots and cracks and things like that. Today we'll look at tool recognition for cutting, workshop equipment that we'll be using in different processes. We're going to be examining the tools and equipment as we go. The manufacturing plans and drawings are going to be checked throughout just to make sure we're doing the right thing, and we will make sure that we do evaluation as we run through all of the processes too. Okay. Right, so cutting, sizing and shaping wood. When we work with wood and manufactured boards, main processes that we'll look at this year will be cutting, sizing, shaping. We'll also look at drilling within this project. Turning on the wood lathe, we won't look at until later on, but it's included in this section really. And assembly and joining methods. And lastly, we'll look at finishing as well. Cutting, sizing and shaping wood requires a range of different tools depending on the shape and the size of the project, of course. And first of all, the raw material we get, we might need to cut that to size using a saw. Now, if I remove this piece of paper just now, these are the 4 pieces of wood that we marked out last time. And if this was your final assignment, imagine this, everybody would be making something completely different to each other. So you wouldn't have all these 4 sections prepared and given to you. You'd be given the entire length, or you'd ask for the entire length. The wood then obviously needs to be measured and marked out. That involves accurately drawing the component parts onto your orthographic working drawing, referencing that all the way through. And really the next thing we need to be doing is looking at tools that we're going to be using for removing all of these kind of waste areas that we've marked out on each section. So next we'll look at tool recognition for this section. And this is the range of tools that you're going to have access to when you're working on your birdhouse. So the main saw that we're going to be using is this one here. This is a tenon saw. And you'll use that for sawing straight cuts. Obviously, you've used them before, so we don't need to go over all of the parts. Smaller one here at the top is still a member of the frame saw family, similar to the tenon saw. It's got this back that goes down to keep the blade rigid. This is a gentleman saw. They're not widely available. I do have a couple of them, but we're specifically going to be using this one for the miter joints. We're also going to use a chisel for removing waste wood. The chisel that we will be using will be a firmer chisel, which is wide, square-edged and flat. It's the best one to use for the joints that we've selected. If you are over at the tool cabinet and you pick up one of these, which is taller and thinner than a firmer chisel, this is a mortise chisel. You can use it, but this is not necessarily the best one to use. Chisel that we've used in the past widely available in school is the bevel edge chisel, as we don't need to try and fit into any kind of a tight corners, maybe that you would find in a dovetail joint or whatnot. We don't necessarily need to use this one, so the firmer one is the correct chisel to use in this instance. We're also going to be using a smoothing plane for smoothing down the surfaces or the edges of the wood. We've also got access to a little block plane here for more detailed work. We'll maybe use this one on the miters at some stage. And then to tidy up the shoulders of the half lap joints, we have two shoulder planes here. This is a normal shoulder plane and this is a bullnose shoulder plane. And we've got access to both. In terms of safety, we'll use safety glasses for down in the workshop once we go onto the drill and onto the belt sander, but we shouldn't need these for working any of the wood at the bench. Right, so I've got the 4 pieces of wood for the box laid out in front of me. It's always good to put all your pieces together, just so that you understand which piece you're working on and where it's supposed to go and whatnot. I think we'll work on the top piece. That's what we started with last time. There's no sense in me showing you every single joint if we're going to be repeating them. So we'll work on this piece just now and then repeat the process later on. So I want to start cutting the miter first. So I'm going to loosen the bench vise, turn it on my bar. I'm going to place the wood in just about that high. I'll maybe move this over to give me space from the camera. And what we want to do with the miter is I'm just going to cut a kerf, so that's the hole that we leave with the saw, just inside the waist area, down maybe about a millimetre, maybe 1.5 millimetres, no deeper than that. Now I want that kerf to be quite fine because I want the edge of this joint to be super neat, super tidy. So in actual fact, I'm not going to use the tenon saw for that. The kerf in the tenon saw is just a wee bit wider than I would like in this instance. So I'll take the gentleman saw instead. This is a lot finer, and place my thumb up near it. We'll think about safety, keep loose clothing and stuff out of the way. You don't need to worry about anything else other than that. And keep your head above the saw, legs in an L shape as usual. A couple of pulls back the way to establish the kerf. Once you've done that, thumb can go out the way, left hand can be positioned. Right, so all you're doing is gently, carefully, and as straight as you can, sawing down about 1 millimetre to 1.5 millimetres. And you can see there that the gentleman saw leaves such a fine kerf, it's almost not visible. I'm going to turn it round and do the opposite. Okay, so coming in again. Thumb to keep it straight, head above the saw, left hand out the way once you've established it. Use the full length of the saw blade. And we're only going to take that down about 1 millimetre. Right, next thing we're going to do is we will loosen the vise off. I want to open this right out to the depth of the wood. You're going to position the wood in like so that the line here on the miter is parallel with the surface of the bench as best you can. Now you're probably better to crouch down while you're doing this. As long as it's not lower than it, that's fine, and you don't want it to be too high. Now the reason that we cut the kerf down is when we plane the bulk of this waist off, we don't want the outside of the wood that we still want to keep, we still want to see. But we don't want that to be bursting out through pressure of planing. Right, so I've turned the wood round in the vise, and as you can see, the line for the miter is just sitting slightly above the bench but parallel to it. That saves the wood that we want to keep from bursting out. And we're almost ready to plane. So we're going to take smoothing plane. When you're not using this, it should be stored flat on the bench like so. You don't want to put it down on its sole. We covered that in the first year because the blade can damage the bench and it can reset the tool, so we're not going to do that. Right, so we'll take the smoothing plane by the handle, hand on the front handle, and you're going to place the toe of the plane on top of the waste wood on the miter. You wouldn't necessarily keep it straight. You want to maybe put a little skew on it, left or right, whatever you prefer. That just helps to remove the wood as you go. Legs in an L shape, back straight, and head directly above where you want to remove the material. So do a single push forward, just to see how much you're taking off. I think this needs a little bit of adjustment, so I'll put the toe of the plane down. I'm going to turn that knob at the back. You can just about see that. That's the depth adjustment knob. I will give this a little feel at the mouth of the plane. You wouldn't do that, you get me to come and do that for you, and maybe a little bit of adjustment with the lateral adjustment lever at the back, just to change whether it's coming out further here than it is here. So I think that should be okay. Back on, should be more happy with the depth now. Push forward. Each time you push forward, you should be lifting the plane up and bringing it back and setting it back down in the toe again. You don't want to be drawing back over, letting the blade plunk against the material. That would reset the blade and it's just a wee bit rougher. We don't want to be doing it that way. So we'll finish this off. Okay, stopping there. We'll remove the material. Okay, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove the material just down to about a millimetre and a half above the waistline that you've marked out. You don't want to plane too tightly to it. Now, in addition to that, at this edge, you can see where the wood's broken out. That's with the plane going across. And because we cut in with the gentleman's saw there, that helped it to break out, but also protected this surface and kept that nice and flat, nice and sharp, so that we don't lose any of that material. Next stage, I'm going to head down to the belt sander just to finish this off and tidy it up. Right, so we're down at the belt sander now. I'm going to put safety goggles on before I start. The machine's safely turned off before we make any adjustment. I'm going to loosen the two little nuts on the guard here and just bring that right up and out of the way just now until we set the machine. And the bed of the belt sander we want to set to 135 degrees. That would leave us the 45 for the mitre. So I've created a 135 template on the laser cutter for this, so we would loosen off the handle for the bed at the right hand side. You want to bring the 135 template in, it's just a wee bit off, and you maybe want to use a second set of hands. If you've not got that in, I use my hip. And quite happy that from one side to the next that's sitting at 135. Template can then go out of the way. Bring the wood in just to look at the height of the thing. And when you're bringing the guard down, what you want to do is bring it down to a level that's going to protect your fingers should the wood snap up the way. But in addition to that, you want to think about your head height. And this would be different from one person to the next. You don't want to bring the guard down too low. That would then cause you to have to crouch down to see the wood. That would bring your face closer to the belt itself, so we don't want to be doing that. So height for me, I'm quite tall. I would keep the guard to there. Wood coming up, that would still protect my fingers. Tighten the two little nuts on the guard. Check the bed's still tight and we're good to go. We're then going to take the little fence that slides into this groove, and this is designed to keep your piece of material 90 degrees to the belt. Now in my experience there's a wee bit too much play in these things, but it's better to use it than not. So just before we start doing this, we're going to take an engineer square just to make sure that we've got the fence set at 90 degrees as intended. Happy with that, and just plonk the fence in here. Engineer square goes out of the way. And take our piece of wood, bring it in, hold it against the fence, and you can see where you're going to remove material. Now, as I say, there's a wee bit of play in this, so you're maybe going to need to just keep a wee eye from the left to the right of the joint. Now, previously we marked a line in pencil down here, we can just about see it. We want to try and keep at least half of that line, that way that we know we are as accurate as we can be from one side to the next. So, emergency stops off, fingers are kept back, goggles are on, loose clothing's out of the way, and on. Okay, we're looking at the back, we can just about see an edge of the line here. We've still got a little bit extra on here, which tells me that the fence wasn't perfectly 90 degrees, so we're going to put this on and freehand it just at the left hand side. And that's us now nice and even from one side to the next. Now we'll take off these extra little fluffy bits of wood back up in the other workshop. Before we go, we need to make sure that the machine's safe. So it has been stopped. Before we reset the bed, we want to press the emergency stop in. We will bring the guard back up just a little bit, raise the bed up. It's still loose though, it hasn't been tightened. Balance that with my hip, bring in an engineer square just to check that it's 90 degrees from one side to the next, and tighten up. Little sweep down, and then reset the guard for the next person that's going to be using the machine. So we're back up in the other workshop now. We have still left a little bit of the pencil lead running from left to right on the inside of the joint. We've got a tiny little bit on the outside. I'm relatively happy that that is nice and straight. Left a little bit of fluff on the inside of that joint, so we'll take a piece of sandpaper and just take that off. We don't want to sand joints very often because it tends to round them off, and that's something we want to avoid, but just a little pass to take that fluff off, and I'm happy with that half mitre being cut. So we'll use the smoothing plane for that. We can put that out of the way, make sure it sits on its side. The other plane that we had mentioned was a block plane. We've got a couple of these in the workshop. They're a wee bit better to use for people with smaller hands, but I don't think I'll be using it in this instance. Place that out of the way. We've got all of the others to do, so I'll go ahead and do those and then let you see them. Right, that's the 4 pieces of wood back up from the finishing off at the belt sander. Again, we've got this kind of a fluff around about the back edge, the inside edge, sorry, so I'm just going to remove that carefully but not sand too far. Just tidies it up a little bit. And then again, before we go any further, what we want to do is take the wood, put it into position, so that would be the front, that would be the bottom, that's the top piece there, and that's the back piece there. We can see where those mitres would come together. So we're looking for a fit top to bottom, making sure that it's nice and square, and we can do this in a couple of ways. I'll just get the sliding bevel. Okay, so my sliding bevel is still set at 45 degrees, so we can take each of these pieces, hold the material in, just look for any gaps in the mitre. You're checking it at each end and in the middle. Happy with that. Bang on 45 degrees, we'll check the other. Happy with that too. Last little check we can do, just put both pieces together, keep it nice and tight on the front. I'll turn this around for you. Nice and tight on the front, and then we can hold a tri-square in just to see if there's any gaps when we get to that angle, and no, I am happy with that. Okay, good. And that's all 4 miters cut. Now, next thing we're going to do, we'll get set up for cutting one of the half laps. So I'm going to move the camera. Okay, I've turned the camera around now. So we're going to look at how we cut the shoulder of the half lap joint next. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. The first way is a wee bit more awkward and takes a wee bit more skill, but if we bring in the bench hook that we used back in first year, this is called a saw board or a bench hook, and we get them left or right-handed. This is a right-handed one, so the cut is here, and that allows you to come in saw with your right hand. Left-handed, the cut is out of the other side of the saw board. So all we would do there is position the wood on the saw board like so. We would keep the line for the shoulder of the half lap up against where that block starts, and tuck our thumb in. Bring in the tendon saw, holding it in the correct way, same way as we've always done. So finger out straight, legs in an L shape, back straight, and left arm straight, head above the line. Nice and steady. And we would do a couple of cuts back the way to establish the curve to begin with, and then start using the entire length of the saw blade, lowering down at the back until you are precisely within that waist area. Okay, happy that I've met the inside of the line here at the back. Okay, and remember when sawing, if you check your line, if you had to check your line at the back or the front, what that's going to do, there's a chance that the saw could actually tilt from left to right just with the position of your head. So if you're wanting to check the depth at the front and then the back of the kerf, then what to do is just stop sawing, take the saw out, clear off the waste wood, and bring your head down to there. I'm just a wee bit high, and then at the front I'm also a little bit high. Come back in again, straighten your body back up. Okay, and that's me at the line here. At the back, I'm happy with that, and just a wee bit high at the front, so back on. And just tilting the blade forward, and then using the tip of the saw to clear out the middle of that joint, and I am happy with that. Down to the line and no further at the front and on the back. So that's the first method. I'll clear off the sawdust and we'll show you the second method now. So we'll take the other piece of wood with the half lap, so this is part D, and this time what we're going to do, I'll just move the camera up, it's a wee bit better, is bring the wood towards the edge of the bench, and we want to bring in a piece of wood that can help guide as a fence, help guide your saw down into this line. Now, instead of trying to scramble for a scrap piece of wood that you maybe just think is going to be square, the other pieces of wood you've already checked, these are square, so why would we not use them? So we'll bring this one up, keep your fingers flush to the front and the back, that'll help you to line up. And you should just about see the pencil line still in here at the shoulder to the joint. So this piece of wood's positioned correctly, we know it's square. This is an inside edge of a joint, so we don't need to worry too much if this gets scratched. And we're going to take a scrap piece of wood, set that on top, clamp the whole thing as an assembly to the bench. So we use a G-clamp for that. When you're using the G-clamp, remember to try and keep the Tommy bar part right down underneath the bench. That keeps everything out of the way, keeps it tidy. Hold it firmly on the top, not on the bottom. Keep your line there, make sure it's nice and straight. Tighten up the Tommy bar at the bottom, just enough to hold it firmly onto the bench. Now, next thing, we're going to bring the saw in. You don't need to use the edge of your thumb to try and line it up this time. You don't need to put your hand out to the left. Just body in the same position. Bring the blade of the saw up flat against the edge of this piece of the wood. And that way, if you maintain that, you know that the saw cut, the kerf, is going to be perfectly straight. So we do start again at the far side. lowering the saw down at the back, but making sure that the blade touches the top piece of wood all the way. And we'll just check that at the front, about 0.5 millimetre more at the back, probably about the same. And that's us to the correct level. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to start removing the wood down to the 1.5 line lap with a chisel, and this process is called paring. So we're going to take the firmer chisel that we spoke about before. Your weak hand should be under the blade of the chisel, not holding the handle, but holding the blade towards the top, same way as we've done in first year. Your strong hand's going to come down with your thumb on top of the ferrule. Your left elbow should be in the bench. Take your forefinger from that hand and place it against the edge of the bench, and then bring the tip of the blade down just about 0.5 millimetre beneath the surface of the wood. And what you can do is you can take the fat pad of your hand, give the chisel a little hit behind, and you can remove a very, very thin section. Alternatively to that, keep the chisel secured in your hand in the same way. Always have it either pointing up the way or flat, but never down. Balance your forefinger against the bench to brace it, and then at a slight angle, just give the chisel a little wiggle and slice in until you get to the shoulder of the wood, and you can do that all the way along. Okay. Now, I'm going to continue doing that all the way along, taking off no more than about 0.5 millimetre's worth of thickness. And once you've gone all the way along, you're going to come back to the beginning again and keep going down until you get to about 1 millimetre or 0.5 millimetre above that line. I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pared off with the chisel the majority of the waste material there. You can see that the middle of the wood here, where the heartwood is, this is a wee bit denser, and therefore when we've been chiseling that, it's been a wee bit more difficult to get that out than the wood at the sides. So it's a wee bit uneven. We could keep going in with the chisel and just being a wee bit more delicate to flatten that out a bit more. But another method is to come in with the shoulder plane that I had shown you before. Now, this is a wee bit awkward with the camera in front of me, but I'll try my best. So 2 hands should be on the shoulder plane as so. Your forefinger should come out straight. You're trying to keep the side of the shoulder plane flush up to the edge of the shoulder here, and we're just going to smooth off the cheek of the half lap. Okay, starting to smooth off now. Now the wood at the other side, we don't want the blade to be punching out here because you could actually split the wood there. So when we're using the shoulder plane, we're only going about 2/3 of the way in. If you feel that not just the cheek is uneven, but the shoulder is a wee bit uneven too, what you can do is you can turn the shoulder plane that way around and use it that way too, or just turn your wood on the bench. Okay, I'll do a little bit more work on that, and then what I'll do is I'll turn the wood, finish off this little bit here. So that's the bulk of waste removed now. The shoulder plane has helped us to smooth all of this out. The shoulder itself is also relatively straight. I'm quite happy with that. But you'll notice that right down in here in the corner of the joint, there's still a lot of bits of sawdust and flakes of dust that are still attached to that corner. Now, what you can do there is you can take the chisel, come in from the opposite side, turn it this way, balance your finger against the bench again, hold the chisel firmly, 2 hands on it, and just get the edge of the chisel down into that corner and just start clearing that material out. Now, what you'll often see people doing is bringing the chisel in as if they were going to chop the end grain, holding it correctly, positioning the chisel over the top of it and trimming the end grain down as so. But if they're going to be clearing out the bottom of that joint there, what you might see them doing is holding the chisel in and then pulling it back the way to get all of that wood to come out. Now, I prefer not to do that, because if you are going to pull the chisel back, there's a chance that you're going to round off the edge of that joint there, and then it wouldn't be tight when the other piece of wood is attached. Very last thing that you need to do there is to take the other piece of wood that is going to actually fit into that joint, get rid of the sawdust, place it in, check it on the inside to make sure it's nice and tight. Happy with that. Just look for any gaps in front here. This is all nice and tight, nothing untoward, and that is the half lap. So I'll go ahead, finish the other three, and then we can talk about the rebate joint. Right folks, so the next stage is to remove the wood from the inside of each piece of the birdhouse, 3mm in and 3mm down. This would create a rebate joint that would house the plastic on the front of the birdhouse. Now, we're going to need a special tool to do that. This is called a rebate plane. There's a few of them in the workshop. They will probably be set to a different size to what you need, so you can either set that yourself or bring it to me. I'll set it for you, or at least show you how to do it. This one hasn't been set, so I'll need to do that just now. I'll let you see how. So we've got the sole of the plane here, and we've also got the side of it here. We've got a fence that stops the blade from cutting in too far, and we've got a depth stop here once it's turned round that stops the blade from going down any further than we want. So the distance between the fence and the side we need to set to 3mm. So we're going to come around here, loosen these thumb screws at the front and the back. That then allows that fence to slide from side to side, and we're looking to make that distance between the side and the fence 3mm. So it's a wee bit awkward. You might need a second set of hands to help you with this. I'm going to take a steel rule and just position the steel rule 3mm from the side to the fence. So I'll just tighten that one there at 3mm with my finger and thumb. I'll do the same thing at the back. And that at the back is just a wee bit too deep actually. A wee bit of pressure on that there, I think, just to pull that out. And yeah, that's us at 3 now. Now once we've done that, there's a lot of weight in this. It's made from cast iron. What we want to do is just not over tighten, but just nip these a little bit more so that the pressure of U-planing doesn't loosen them off any and change the cut halfway through doing it. So that's 3mm from the fence to the side of the rebate plane. We now need to do the same thing with the depth stops. So the plane's upside down just now, obviously. So we're going to loosen off the depth stop fence. And this time we are trying to measure the distance between the depth stop and the sole of the plane, which is this surface here. Think about where the blade is. And we'll just slide this up. Happy with that, 3mm. I'll give it a little thumb tighten and just triple check it. Happy with that. Turn it around a little, and just the same as the side fence, I'm just going to tighten that up. And that's the tool set. Last little thing, we need to make sure that the mouth of the rebate plane has no waste clogging it up. And as you can see here on this one, the blade itself has just kind of gone offset. Now, we would set up the cap iron here and the depth adjustment knob here to decide how far in we're going to cut and just to set the lateral adjustment of it. I don't want you to be messing about with that on your own, so you would bring it to me if you think that the blade is just a wee bit off. I'll adjust that just now for myself. Okay, happy with that. Tool's now nice and tight. And we'll give this a little go now. It might need further adjustment after the first couple of cuts, but we'll see how we do. So I'll get rid of my stool. Hopefully, I'll just check on camera that you can still see all of this. Yes, you can. So your fingers are going to go underneath the rebate plane. You're going to position your fingers against the fence. Now, the tool's made from cast iron. It's going to want to go down the way, so you don't need any pressure to force it down. But you do need a little bit of pressure just to keep the plane pushing in towards the joint. Okay, one thing to watch out for, safety. You do have an open blade here, so you need to make sure that your fingers don't come back and touch that. And then you're holding the handle with your forefinger out straight, as you used to do. Next thing, we want to try and take off material at the front here, or sorry, the left of the rebate. One little bit at a time, and then take a bit more off each pass you do. So we'll start at the front. And you can see there that I'm starting to remove material 3mm in. It's not quite 3 down yet, but it's starting to generate a little slope of a cut. We want that slope just to gradate itself back the way until we get to the opposite end. Okay, now the waste that's coming off is relatively fine curls of wood there. That's an indicator that it is cutting correctly. We're now down 3mm here, 3mm in, relatively square. That'll tidy up as we move along, and I'll go ahead and finish this off for you now. Okay, so that's the rebate now cut. I can take steel rule and just measure it for size there at the left, there at the right. I'll just check it for distance in from the inside, 3 in the middle. Quite happy with that. One last thing that you could do is, well, we'll just clear out a little bit of the fluff there, is we could take a piece of acrylic. I don't have the piece that's actually going to fit into the box, but I could take this piece of acrylic, scrap piece, it's the same thickness, place it against the material here and just check that it's flush at the top. Quite happy with that. Just check it that way too for good measure. Absolutely perfect. And that is the rebate cut. We've gone over all the processes for the half lap, all the processes for the mitre, and you obviously are going to need 4 of those. Okay, right, I'll go ahead and get the other 3 cut for your demonstration, and we will revisit that in the next video. Thank you, folks.